Hi, welcome to episode 2 of SBJ's Painting School. Today we're going to be chatting to some of my friends about painting tips, tricks and their favourite things about the painting that they do. Without further ado, let's play the intro. If you're watching this video, then hopefully you're going to come away with some nice little tips and tricks and get to know some fantastic painters that I've had the pleasure of knowing over the last 10 years or so. As we move on in this period, this is like the last fun video that we're going to be doing, where I'm going to be doing some questions and some of my friends are going to be answering. Now, you may recognise some of these people, you may not recognise some of these people. What I do urge is that no matter what walk of life you come from in terms of your painting, give all of these people a follow. The reason I've picked a lot of these people is because there's some very different styles in this group of people, and some of them have given me some fantastic advice in the past, and I wanted to include them. So if you haven't by the beginning of this video, I hope by the end of it you can go and follow all of these people on Instagram, Facebook or whatever means that they provide in the questions. So without further ado, let's introduce who's coming along and let's start the questions.
Hi guys, Dibley here.
Hi, I'm Stuart from Miniature Realms Studio, commission painter, also from Miniature Realms YouTube channel and Out to the Frying Pan podcast.
Hi, I'm Tris and I have a channel called Double O'Neill.
Hi there, I'm Law from Squarehead Studios.
Hi, I'm Dave from Banter's Yard.
Hi, I'm Jody, Smiling on the Inside Painting on Instagram.
I'm Steve. This is Neville Grove, which is also the name of my weathering business.
Question 1. What are your favourite 3 paints?
Right, so I quite like to use the 59mm artist acrylics from the range. Specifically, I like the dark grey, which is actually quite a medium grey, or light grey even. I don't know why they call it dark grey. For me, it's ideal for doing dry brushing of wood to make it look aged and sun bleached. I really like that. The next colour would be burnt umber. I use it for general mud, sort of watered down for general filth. It's also really good for dark rust patches if you sort of get a really old stubby brush and sort of stipple it on as your base coat. So after you've done your original base coat colour, then use the stipple this on so it's quite lumpy. And I've actually started mixing it with limestone dust to give it a bit more texture, so that when you do top coats later on, you've got some sort of areas where it'll blister. So that's another one. And then the other colour is burnt sienna, which I find is ideal for lighter rust. You can either use it for dry brushing corners, you can use it for chipping, or you can water it down very slightly and use it for streaks. If you use a fine brush, you can streak it. Or, as I experimented with recently, into corners of the bottom of a steel plate on a wagon, watered it down, sort of put a couple of drips in, and then sort of dragged it either way with a brush. And that turned into quite a nice sort of a pooled rust effect type of thing. So that's my favourite 3 paints anyway.
So my 3 favourite paints, this changes a lot I think, depending on what sort of projects I'm onto at the time. I love scale colour, scale 75, Necro Gold probably, and decayed metal. So there's 2 metallics there right at the top. Absolutely love those. And then another one, I'm really liking contrast Blood Angels Red at the moment, but you ask me another day and I'll change my mind.
My favourite 3 paints. I've had a good think about this and it's really hard because there's so many good ones out there. First of all, there's quality of paint. So I think that the Vallejo paints are very, very good. So like using their black, you can mix it with some water or some paint thinners and you can get some good coverage where the pigment seems to make it black with it being thin so you don't lose detail. So the Vallejo paint's there. So in the Vallejo paint range, the satin varnish I use a lot, as well as their black, and that really gives a good coverage and gives me the effect that I'm after. The second one that I really like is it's Rail Match. So their pigment I find isn't as good. I have to do more coats. but with that I get the colour that I like. I haven't managed to find this colour in the Vallejo range. I've been buying all the different greens. I will find it. Yeah, I find this paint though, you have to give it longer to dry, but once it's gone hard, it's good. It's acrylic paints like the Vallejo paints, but it's very good. The next one, and I'd like to say two of the paints within that paint range, is Citadel. So they've got their normal colours, which is their kind of like base paints. So I use this McCrag blue quite a lot to paint up the shirts and jackets and stuff. And then for the skin tone, I really like this contrast paint by Citadel. So they're my three brands that I like as such.
First one, it's got to be Tamiya Flat White. It is great for an airbrush and it just goes on really, really well, and it's great for a pre-highlight on your models when you're just before you put the colours on. Next up is Scale 75 Flat Black. Really, really nice for matte black that just takes all the shine off of black, makes it look really, really nice. Really like how it comes out and gives a little bit of depth and gives you a nice base for a highlight as well, if you fancy using one. And finally, final third is Scale 75 Decayed Metal. I use it on pretty much every model that I paint because I love the colour. It looks really, really nice.
So the three colours or the three paints that I've got pretty much all the time on the shelf are these. So the first one is just a nice primer. This is a car primer, a company called High Coat. You can buy this from the range, you can buy it on Amazon, that sort of thing. Doesn't go on too thick. You can give it a dusting with that if you're worried about thickness of this, but it dries really quickly and your acrylics will bond to that really well. So always have a primer on bare plastic or resin. My second favourite is this, which is a Vallejo model colour, and it's a colour called Smoke. And being model colour, you need to mix this down with acrylic thinners, otherwise it's too thick, doesn't come out of the airbrush. And if you use it in an airbrush, it will give you a nice smoky look to the top of the roofs of coaches and wagons and that sort of thing, without changing the colour. It's not a paint as such, it's just like a filter over the top. So that's always come in nice and handy for aging and weathering. And the other final colour that I have all the time is this Model Air, and this is a colour called US Earth Brown, and it's just a nice generic sort of grime colour, sort of dirt, which you can use to spray on sort of under frames. And I've even used that a number of times to completely coat some logos like the little packets and so on. You just rub it back with a cloth or a cotton bud, and it leaves all the dirt in the nooks and the crannies. It just gives it a nice aged appearance. And being Model Air, it's already thinned. You haven't got to worry about thinning that, and that will just go straight in your airbrush and straight onto your model.
Current favourite three have to be Scale 75, the Decayed Metal, because that's just a great base for any golds, coppers, anything like that. The Vallejo Gunmetal, the airbrush paint, Game Air I think it is. That's just a really nice dark silver, really high metallics. I love that as just, again, because it's a base, goes on everything. And then the Model Colour Black, just because it's a staple. Need it for, you know, so many things, for tidying up metallics and doing whatever. So that's my three go-to paints.
So I use lots of paints for my weathering work, but the three paints that I couldn't do without would be Rail Match Frame Dirt, Weathered Black and Roof Dirt. I tend to use them in various mixes, and I thin them down and I put them into these dropper bottles, and that way they can go straight, you can squeeze them straight into the airbrush. Far less mess, very quick, no hassle. Yeah, good way of doing it.
Question 2. What's your favourite painting trick?
I don't know if this really is actually a painting trick or not. I actually quite like, when I paint real wood, like for instance coffee stirrers, I quite like to sand it back as if you would in real life with a really fine paper. so that it actually exposes either the earlier layers of paint that you've painted, so underneath, so you get a nice sort of flaky effect, or sometimes even right back to the wood. You'll see it in a photo on something later where I've done that later on in these questions, but that's probably my favourite painting trick. I don't know if it really counts because it's not actually paint, it's removing paint, but we'll see.
Again, this changes quite a lot as well. I think at the moment, painting with contrast paints over a zenithal pre-shade, I think they've got a lot of uses beyond just the kind of basic slop-a-tom for a quick paint job. I think that's been realised now anyway. I know when they first came out that they were maybe looked down on slightly, but now a lot of painters are using them. They go great for the airbrush as well. So using contrast paints over zenithal, really good base to then build up and highlight from normally, and you can't really tell contrast has been used once you've finished.
I guess with the Citadel paints, the contrast paint's really good. You paint the face white to begin with, and then you put this on, and the contrast paint goes into all the crevices and it picks out all the details. And whatever tone you want, the skin, you just apply a bit more of it and it will change the shade. So yeah, it's a really good paint. So it's by Citadel, and it's Guillermin Flesh is a contrast paint that they do. Really good.
Is either oil washes, because they hide so many mistakes, or putting some red paint on the end of an airbrush, on a hairy brush, and then just blasting air through the airbrush onto it to give a nice blood splatter effect, and it comes up really nice.
There's something that I borrowed from sort of armour modelers, military modelers, especially is chipping techniques, and there's a few different ways of doing that, and I've done a video before on YouTube. The cheapest and simplest way is to use hairspray. So this is called hairspray chipping, obviously, and this is just a cheap Azuri type one. You can buy, you know, whichever one you want, but this is good enough. This is about half full and has lasted me about 4 years, so it's good value for money. And if you don't know what to do, you would paint your model in whatever the underneath colour you want. In this case it's rust, a couple of coats of hairspray which you let to dry, and then a colour over the top, your normal top colour. Let that dry as well for just a few minutes, and then using just plain old water you can start to brush it over, and the top coat will come off. The hairspray acts as like a release medium. You can do it different ways as well. That's like chipper medium for Vallejo, that works okay, although the effect is more subtle. Or you can use salt rather than hairspray, and that gives a more chipped appearance.
I'm really liking the AK Interactive Camo Putty. Yeah, so I have a big can of the, it's basically like a black goo, and you put it onto the panels where you want it to be, and then you spray around, and that stuff's just brilliant because you can reuse it and it doesn't leave any greasy marks afterwards.
My favourite painting trick or weathering technique is probably still actually using like a chipping medium, or chipping fluid, or chipping solution. There's several products out there. This one is by MIG Ammo, but it's so good at transforming like a really plasticky looking model into a convincing representation of a very weather-beaten, rusty and old wagon, coach or whatever really. It's also particularly good for creating peeling paint effects as well, so you can reveal like a previous layer of paint underneath the top coat. Superb for locomotive roofs and coach roofs as well.
Question 3. What is the one painting item you'd encourage everyone to get?
It'd probably have to be an airbrush. I've got 2 airbrushes. One was a bit cheap and shit, and the other one is slightly better. Still cheap, but slightly better. It may seem a bit of a faff cleaning it first, but if you start using Bunter's Yard's cleaning techniques, it becomes a lot less of a faff. It is still a faff, but it's much less. But to be fair, you're not going to, I mean, for when I'm weathering stuff, I probably copy what Dave does similar, blow it on with the airbrush and then drag it down with the brush. But it's also quite nice for just dusting the bottom. I've actually do most of my priming with it now. I used to use aerosol cans for priming, but the pigment's a bit thick and you kind of lose detail. Now I use the Vallejo primer with the airbrush, blast it on there, and a lot of the detail stays, which is quite nice. So that's what I would probably suggest if you can go for it. Obviously, it's a bit expensive because you need an airbrush and you need a compressor, and you probably want a fairly quiet compressor. So otherwise it gets a bit annoying. My little one I've got is actually quiet enough that when my kid and my wife are sleeping, it's sat on the floor just down there and it still doesn't wake them up. Well, I don't think it does anyway.
Probably the airbrush. I know that a lot of people are still wary of using an airbrush. They think about the cost, which is absolutely a real problem for some people. Think about the space and the noise and the compressor and things. If you have any kind of permanent setup, you can usually find an airbrushing solution for you. And even with painting booths and things these days, if you've got space to store in your garage, you can usually get one out and use it quite safely within the home environment. I appreciate people that live in flats or apartments somewhere, it's a little bit harder, but definitely get an airbrush if you've got space to use it. One
painting item that I'd encourage people to buy, it's hard because you can't just ask that. If I could do a top 3, it'd be, yes, find a brush with a good tip and look after it. I like to use these little mixers. You can get wet palettes, but I just use these, and when they get a bit too full, you get your fingernail under and it all peels out, because I just use acrylics anyway. I'm sure enamels will peel off too. And the third thing, I don't know, we'll just go with the 2 for that one. I think those 2 are the 2 most important things. Just look after your brushes, that's really important. Keep those tips pointy, give it a little lick.
I would say a high quality daylight bulb light. It really does make the difference when you're painting. You can see absolutely everything. I didn't know how much I needed one until I actually got one, and it was an absolute revelation. And if you haven't got one, you need to get one.
So question 3, any item that I'd encourage anybody to buy. I know a number of modelers are kind of against the idea of using airbrushes because they think they're a bit of a faff, really. They're quite hard to clean out. They don't get particularly good results. But I would suggest that anybody that's really into it, any sort of modelling, especially on the railway, is to get yourself an airbrush. And I would avoid buying an airbrush that's like £20 or £30 from Amazon. This particular one is a Neo, which is licensed by Iwata, and these are about £80 and £90 on Amazon. This one I've had for about 3 years now, and they just go on and it's just lovely. The problem is if you buy a cheaper airbrush, it's a bit of a false economy because if it clogs or if it doesn't spray particularly well, or it's just poorly made for £30, obviously there's a limitation on how it's made. Then you will get poor results, or it'll be difficult to use, and it'll put you off the idea of using an airbrush. So buy once, buy right, as they say. So Iwata Neo, so that's the one I'd go for, about £90.
A good brush, a really good brush, and keep it clean and keep using, and just replace it regularly. I'm crap for it, but get really good, spend the money. Winsor & Newton's are great, Rosemary & Co, really worth having a look at, and just get like a decent size too.
I would really recommend that anyone gets like a turntable to go on the workbench. Put your model on here, you can rotate it around, get access to any side of it for painting without actually touching it, or touching it minimum amount of times as possible. You don't want to be handling your models whilst you're painting them, or even before you're painting them. Even better than this is to find yourself like a second-hand or very cheap Lazy Susan, which is used for food on dining tables.
Question 4. What's the one item in your painting collection that you're surprised by?
Wasn't really sure what to go for here, so this is a bit of a weak answer, but I suppose when I finally bought some Vallejo Model Air, because I am a tight ass, as anyone who follows me would know, I've been using lots of cheap acrylics and watering them down. I must say the Vallejo Air does go on better, hardly needs any thinning really. I don't really put much thinner with it. And also I think the pigment's smaller, so you don't get so much splattering. It doesn't sort of splatter with great big blobs. It just seems to cover better. But I am no expert in airbrushing, so there you go.
Probably Artist Opus dry brushes. I didn't think they'd last 5 minutes. I like the idea. I've been using makeup brushes for doing dry brushing for a long time. Artist Opus brushes are very expensive. For normal paint brushes, I tend to use Broken Toad and Rosemary & Co. Series 33. I find them fantastic. So I never quite needed to go that extra little cost with the Artist Opus, but I did on a whim decide to pick up the dry brushes after watching some really good tutorials, and they've been really good. My next fear was they'd only last a couple of months, and I think I'm about 9-10 months into them now, and I'm only getting to the stage of replacing my most used one, so definitely worth it. And I know that Army Painter and Wall Bases have brought out some of their own now. I haven't compared those yet. They are much cheaper, so I will try those out at some point.
Actually, it wasn't a good surprise, a bad surprise. When I painted my 94XX, I'll just grab it. So my 94XX, lovely little logo, it's quite cute. It's a little 040, you can get that in focus there. I really do like this logo. But my paint finish was terrible. It was all blotchy because I hadn't figured out how to do things properly on my airbrush yet, and how to get paint through in a way that it came out smooth. And so it actually taught me along a lot, because when I did my narrow gauge one, which we get that in focus, that came out really, really nicely and smooth, and you learn things by your mistakes really. And yeah, so it was a surprise in a more of a negative way. I was really disappointed, but I am going to redo that sometime. I
was actually really surprised by these stippling brushes, which I got from Amazon for about £2, and they were absolutely amazing. They let me paint a whole table of industrial terrain, and it came up really, really well.
So these are called oil brushes, and I've got a set of 6. They come in sets, or you can buy them individually, but they come in sort of a curated sets, so you'll get similar rust colours or filters or whatever you choose. So these are oil colours that are already mixed down, so you need a different thinner to sort of manipulate these. But with these you can do lots of oil streak effects. You would just dot it on, drag it down with a damp brush, and it will give you a rust streak. If you use more thinners, then the rust will spread out and just give you kind of a vague brown rusty patch. So they're really good to use, very easy, and I was surprised about how simple they are to use. So these are oil paints, and they dry fairly quickly. You're supposed to leave them overnight, but they do dry fairly quickly, and you can sort of crack on and carry on with your model.
I don't know. Yeah. now you've done it, I'm like, oh.
I could use that as an answer if you really want.
Nothing's supposed to be. I'm old.
So most recently I've been surprised by my spray booth for my airbrush. It sucks in all the nasty particulates that are emitted from your airbrush when they're in the air, and you can potentially breathe them in. Some of them have a filter, like my one has a filter in it, and it looks like this when it goes in you. However, when I recently swapped mine after 2 months work, it was like that. So this is all that rail match, roof dirt, frame dirt, weather black, all on here. Could have gone in my lungs. Surprised me, shocked me really that I'd left it so long. Should look like that. Swap yours more often.
Question 5. What's your favourite model you've ever painted?
I haven't really got a favourite. I've got a hell of a lot I like, but all of them have at least one bit that I'm not happy with, so nothing stands out to me to be like, oh yeah, that is my favourite. So, I mean, there's all sorts. There's my Smoky Joe, there's the GWR pannier that I did, there's so many of the wagons that I've done that I quite like, but there's always something on there that I don't like. So the only one that I could probably look at and go, well, there's nothing really I would change on it, is the gable ends on my good shed. So I'll be giving Sam a photo, and hopefully that will pop up in his video as a still.
Probably easier to say favourite model I've never got around to finish painting. I don't know. I think it changes quite a lot depending on what I'm into at the time. In terms of pure sculpt, it's going to be something from the Middle Earth Strategy Battle Game range, but Again, often the last thing I've just painted for myself is my favourite, so bit of a dodgy answer.
I just had it up here. My narrow gauge one here. It's just a sweet little logo. Again, you've got it on here. Get you in focus. And yeah, you can see this beautiful little logo. Really, really happy of how that came out in the end.
That's a toss-up really between a Vorax squad that I painted for my Ultramarines and the bases and the dynamics of the models just they just look really, really nice, and they just look evil, and yeah, perfect for what I wanted for them, considering they're part of a destroyer company. Or having said that, I painted an industrial table for home, and I'm really happy with the way it came out. Really, really enjoyed painting it, and it was just fun.
Probably most of the time it's probably the last one that I painted that I like more than anything else. And this is fairly recent. This is this is just an Hornby TTA, so nothing particularly special. I bought these from I think I bought them from Rouse or something like that. They've already been sort of modified. Someone had already put etched brass walkways and ladders, but I've reconfigured them and moved the ladder to kind of where they would be on this particular wagon, and then rusted it in a bit, and weathered it in a particular way that I was really pleased with the effect. I really like that. I've got 4 more to do, which is yeah, okay, it's got to be done.
It has to be the Ultramarines Mastodon. I painted it last year, and it's the first time I painted anything of that sort of scale, but also I got to try and test out loads of things. So I actually painted the interior fully as well. So I went full on, you know, did loads of weathering, did loads of using hairspray on the interiors so I could reveal all the metals behind, did loads of OSL, and just, yeah, it was great because it just pushed me a little bit out of my comfort zone. You normally, you know, tend to stick with your standard size models, but the Mastodon definitely pushed me through. That was great.
Right, so I don't really have a favourite model that I've worked on. There's been so many in the last year or two, and then for my own fleet before that, many years before that. But it's normally the last thing that I've worked on, or the thing I've worked on most recently, or at any given point. So this is a great example. I've just this week completed this set of steel carrying wagons. There's so much to get stuck into on that, for various different weathering techniques. Yes, superb models as well. A highlight possibly has got to be this Coronation Scott train. It's got the streamline locomotive at the front, which is absolutely stunning. Such a striking livery as well, and then the coaches all match that. Every coach is different. It's got the interior lighting on it, and I was lucky enough to weather that for a customer. It's a beautiful model of a stunning and absolutely amazing train. That's got to be a highlight, I'd say.
Question 6. What's one item on your wish list to paint?
So I've taken it as an item to paint, and I'd like to do a model that has some stone wall or brick wall, and I really want to do all the different brick colour effects, because all the brickwork I use is printed paper, but I'd like to do a proper brickwork, do all the mortar and stuff like that, and do the capillary to let it run in and stuff, which you may have seen on Buntus Yard's videos and stuff like that. I just want to have a go at doing that, really. I'm not honestly trying to copy Dave on everything, but, you know, just most things, Dave, if you watch this.
Finished painting any of the many projects I've got on the go at the moment, really. I've got piles and piles of stuff I'm really, really excited to paint, and haven't got the time. I really want to finish painting Smaug, really, really do. And I've got 2 really, really big epic scale historical armies with Napoleonics and American Civil War at the moment, which really, really want finished so I can play some big games as well. So it's not really a wish list item. Sounds quite bad. Most things, if I see, you know, if the models are released and I really, really want it enough, I can buy it. So it's not kind of that. It's about time for me, really.
I'd like to paint my Bachman Baldwin that I got from kind of like 2 years ago for my narrow gauge line, which I'm not sure even what I'm doing with that, but it's a Southern Railway one, and I understand I might be wrong, but it never came in Southern Railway colour, so therefore I could have it in Great Western Railway colours if it was never in Southern. So that's something I like to do because I think it will look brilliant, and that's definitely a video I'm going to do in, let's say, the coming year.
Either a Titan, just for the sheer challenge. I wouldn't want to build it though. Or maybe Sanguinius, because he has got so many intricate details, feathers, animal fur, trinkets on his armour. It would take ages to do, but it would really be worthwhile because he looks it's an amazing sculpt and he would look amazing on the table.
So I've got a few sort of sitting in the on the sidelines. I think this is one of the next one. This is the Acura Scowl steel carrier, and I've seen some pictures of these where the tops are really well sort of weathered, and there'll be sort of rust running down the sides. I've got 4 of these to do, and so I'm looking forward to doing those. And also got a rake of 12 gypsum containers, again from Acura Scowl. So I'm looking forward to making a start on those. But you know, like a lot of railway modelers, I'm a bit of a butterfly really, because I'll do 1 or 2 and then I'll move on to something different. So I'm not sure how well I'm going to get on with doing a rake of 12. We'll see. I'll probably do 3 at a time, and we'll go from there. Try not to do them all at the same time, because they end up being very similar. If I do 3 and then I come back to it, you know, a day or a week later, the next 3 will be slightly different because I'll have another idea or try something slightly different. So I try not to do them all in one go, or in one sort of session or one sitting. I'll break them into smaller units, smaller amounts.
Well, I am a nightmare for collecting models. My pile of potential is ridiculous. Potentially about 2 years worth of painting there, if I actually thought about it. In there is a Night Porphyron, which I'm desperate to paint. I've had that for 2 years. I'm feeling quite shameful saying that. And I've also got I've also got a Reaver, which also I really want to get painted, full scale, not a tiny one, just in case people are asking. But then also, a couple of years ago, I built a full diorama for Samos, and he's coming out the floor, and there's loads of dead marines everywhere, and it's still base coated. I want to get that done. It'll be amazing. So yes, that's my 3. I'm afraid not your 1 like you asked for. That's my 3.
So my wish list, I would love to have it in my own collection, but I'd also just love to paint a model of Big Bertha, which was the famous Licky banker. All it would do was go up and down this 2-mile stretch of line near Bromsgrove. Very famous, very big loco, but it's so niche because there's only ever 1 built, so it's never going to be a model built of that. So more realistically, I suppose I would really like to work on the Hornby APT, a completely different model. It's a complete train, and with its tilting mechanism, I'd love to see it fly around Neville Grove after a bit of weathering, nice subtle weathering to bring it to life.
And finally, question 7. If people want to find you, what's the best way to locate you on social media?
I'm on Instagram as Dibs Yard Shunting Layout. I'm on Twitter as Dibs Yard. I'm on the Google sites as Dibs Yard. I'm also on Railway Modelers. I can't remember what I am actually on there, but I can tell you the profile number. It's 3855. But I expect if you just search Dibs Yard on Railway Modelers, you will find me. So that's it.
If people want to find me on social media, how do they? So the best places would be through Miniature Realms, any of the social media, so that's Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. That's quite generalised. It links to my painting studio in terms of work, but it also links to my YouTube channel, and there's a range of things on there, all different genres. A lot of the historical stuff I do, as well as the fantasy stuff and work as well, so I put on my commission things on there, not all, but a fair amount. And then if you're interested in Middle Earth, I'm also available via the Out of the Frying Pan podcast, and you can also find that on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram as well.
So check out my Instagram channel, 00Neil, My Facebook channel is same, 00 Neil, so OO Neil, Neal. And also my YouTube channel, I put a lot of effort into that. I work really hard on the videos to try and bring you what I feel is a good quality bit of content that will hopefully help you with your hobby habits.
You can find me at Squarehead Studios on Instagram.
So I've got a couple of social media things going on. Obviously YouTube, so you can find us, just search Bunter's Yard, and you can find us on YouTube, and there's lots of different weathering videos on there. And it's really started off with just me just showing what I was doing. They're not necessarily instructional videos, but yeah, it's just if people want to follow along, then that's great. So that's always good. And then on Instagram as well, it's just nice to share ideas on there, show people what you've been up to recently, and get some nice ideas. Again, Bunter's Yard on Instagram, and that's where you can find us.
To find me on social media, it's Smiling on the Inside Painting. It's a little grumpy Space Marine on the logo.
You can find me on Instagram. The handle there is @neville.grove, and you can also find me on YouTube, where you can see trains running on the layout put to archive sound. The channel is Neville Grove. I hope to see you there.
There we have it, all questions answered, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Please, as I've already said, make sure that you go and follow all of the people in this video so that you can follow all of the amazing things they do and hopefully pick up some future tricks. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure that you tell your friends, like and all that stuff, and if you don't, that's okay too. Thank you very, very much for watching, and I'll see you guys soon. Thanks very much.
Did you say balls deep?